Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Modesty's Property Corner. This is episode number 27. How are you all today? I hope we're all doing well. It's still me, your man, Ikenna Umezudike, and today we're delving up. In fact, we are continuing the conversation, the discussion along this very historically debatable topic, in the property investment world, especially in the UK here, of houses versus flats. For people who want to invest in properties, this is a very, very this is a debatable topic, and a lot of property investors have been debating on this thing for time immemorial. Even up till today, that debate still rumbles on. It still goes on. There are people who are very much on the extreme of one side, saying that, absolutely, houses are the best form of property investment. But there are some who are saying, I'm never touching houses, I'm a flat person, I'm just going to continue investing in flats. They have their own reasons. And the truth of the matter is that all these classes or all these property types have their pros and their cons. People who believe that houses are a better investment have a strong conviction and a strong reason for believing in that. And people who believe that flats are a better property investment have a strong conviction as well and a strong reason for doing that. And if both property types have their pros and cons, so you wouldn't fault anyone who is on either side, because as long as that is working out for them, and as long as their conviction is strong enough and they have evidence to back it up, well, you wouldn't fault them for that. But the purpose of this conversation today, and us talking about this, is to throw more lights on these property types and to educate our audience on these property types, things that you need to know, highlighting the pros and cons, certain information that you have that has to be available to you if you're investing in any of these property types, so that when you make that investment, you make it on the basis of you make an informed decision on where you want to invest and how you want to invest and what type of property you would like to invest in, whether you're investing in property, in houses, or whether you're investing in flats. So if you've got your gloves, put them on. If you've got your flat gloves, put them on. If your gloves are if you're on the housing side, put yours on. Flats are gonna be on the blue corner. The houses are gonna be on the red corner, and the gloves are off, because today, we are going to really dig deep into houses versus flats. But for the purpose of this session, we're gonna take it one type at a time. So today we are going to be starting with flats. We are not even going to finish talking about flats today, because I really want to make this session as broad enough, as educative enough, and I really want to pack loads of content into it, so that people who are watching, who are listening, wherever you are listening, you'll be well educated by the time we finish this session about investments in flats. And it's not even going to end today, because we are still going to continue talking about flats next week, because there are lots of things that I would like you to know. So if you're not sitting properly, sit up, get your popcorn, your pen, your paper, whatever, and get ready, because we are going to dig very deep into it today. So I'm going to start with giving you what I call the general comparative schools of thought. The things that are commonly believed, the common beliefs among property investors when it comes to these types of properties, houses and flats. One of them is that houses are better because it doesn't have any ground rents or service charges, attached to them. So when you buy a house, no freeholder or no management company is asking you to pay ground rent or service charges. And some people believe that on that basis, because of that extra cost that is not attached to that investment, houses are better. That's one, comparative school of thought. There's also another comparative school of thought that's, things that flats, take some elements of control away from you, and then they hand that control over to the freeholder. In the sense that when you, if there are things that needs to be done, you are not entirely in control of the flat that you bought. There are certain decisions that are reserved exclusively for the freeholder to make or for the management company to make. Maybe there is a maintenance issue in the property or the flat, and you don't have a say over who carries out the maintenance work, how much it's going to cost, or whatever. You just get a bill that this maintenance work has been done, and this is how much you've got to pay as an owner on that of a flat in that block. So some people see it as the control being taken away from them and handed over to the freeholder or to the management company. But so what people spin it around, and they kind of say, well, it's not actually the control being taken away from me. It is actually responsibilities and liabilities being taken away from me, and then I'm not responsible for this because I don't have the time. So they see it as an opportunity to invest the time they would have spent on sorting out that maintenance issue or making that decision on something else. So you can see the difference in thoughts. The same issue, different thought processes on that. The same issue, different opinions on that. While some see it as control being taken away from them, some are seen as burden being taken away from them, leaving them with enough time to deal with other things. Now, that maintenance costs for flats could be costly, especially when third parties are involved in managing them. The maintenance, some school of thought think that, it's just too expensive because they don't get to negotiate who does the work. And a third party like a management firm takes care of the costing, they take care of the arranging the works, and they just bring a bill. And they might be thinking, if I were to do this, it would cost me less to do it on my own. So I'm not really in control of all the costs that are associated with my investment. And not too many people are very comfortable with not being in control of costs that are associated with their investment. There are people who, when they want to make investments, they want to be in complete control, especially when it comes to costs. Because you can control the costs in your investment, you can automatically control the returns on that investment. You can control the yield on that investment. So some people see that, because they are not in complete control of, say, maintenance costs and some other costs associated with their property, their investments in flats, they see that, it's a no-no for them because, sorry. Yeah, so now there's another school of thought that's of the opinion that you see flats at the end of the lease term, that you have to hand the flats over to the freeholder. You see, this is an old school thought, and it's actually wrong in a way because you don't necessarily have to hand the flats back to the freeholder at the end of the lease term. Yes, a lot of flats, especially in England and Wales, are on leasehold, which means that you do not own the land on which the structure is standing. The land belongs to somebody else, which is now leased to you, and then you own that lease for a certain number of years. And some people believe that because it's on leasehold, at the end of the lease term, you are bound to hand the flat over to the freeholder. It's not entirely true because you can actually buy the freehold from the freeholder, or you can keep on extending the leases, for time immemorial. There are some leases that last for as long as 900 years. It's almost like a freehold. Some leases are so long that they will actually outlive you and your fifth generation. So the notion that you are going to be handing the flats over to the freeholder at the end of the lease term, I know the sense of not owning that property might be at the back of the mind of some people because they feel like, if I'm a leaseholder, I do not actually own this property. I'm just like a tenant living on somebody's land. And then at the end of the tenancy, I'm going to hand the land over to them. Technically, that's what it might look like. But in reality, that's really not the case, because you can actually buy the freehold from the freeholder and become the freeholder yourself. Now, there are also schools of thought that believe that flats have higher yields because they cost less than houses. Okay, that's another comparable school of thought for flats, that they have a higher yield because they cost less than houses do cost. And in some way this is true, but in other if you look at it from another angle, it's not entirely true. Now, some flats cost even more than some houses. There are some areas where the flats are more expensive than houses, depending on the location of the flats, the type of flats. There are some luxury flats that are far more expensive than houses. Okay, but in most cases, flats cost less than houses, and the lower the cost of the property, the more the potential yield that you can get out of that property, especially if you're having to borrow, to finance the purchase of that property. The lower the costs, the more the potential yield you can get from that property. So that's how, I think that's what has kind of fueled that thought that flats have a better yield because they cost less. Yes, if they are cheaper, they are potentially going to give you better yields. But flats don't always cost less than houses. There are certain areas where flats cost more than houses, and in that situation, you might have houses giving you a better yield than the flats. Now, another school of thought that is comparable here is that less maintenance worries. The flats come with less maintenance worries because the owners of the flats don't actually deal with arranging the external works. Say if there is a leak in a flat, and the leak has to do with the roof, you do not expect the owner of the flat to actually deal with it, because the roof is not the responsibility of the owner of the flat. So to them, that's less things for them to worry about. It's for the freeholder or the managing agent to deal with that, and that's what they're interested in. So that if they own their house and there was a leak, and that leak was coming from the roof, they would be the ones to go and take care of that, and it might actually cost them a lot more. Yes, even with flats, yes, you're going to pick up the bill at some point, but at least they don't have to go start looking for roofing experts or go start arranging the works and making appointments, making time to be there to supervise the work and all that stuff, because they haven't got the time. So to some people, it's a more convenient way of them investing in properties, because that's one less thing for them to worry about. Because the issue of maintenance, or maybe something that has to do with the stairs or the common areas or the garden, these things are none of their businesses, because it's always dealt with by the freeholder or the managing agent. So they see it as an advantage for them, because it takes one less worry away from them. So these are some of the comparative thoughts that I just felt like, let me share with you, and let's start up with this. But the next, I just want to draw your attention to things that you've got to be on the lookout for if you're going to be investing in flats. There are 10 things that I've listed that you need to take note of if you're going to be investing in flats. I've had the privilege of arranging mortgages for some of my clients who are buying flats. And my encounter with them, for some of them, it just clearly showed that they did not gather enough information about the flats that they were trying to buy before they actually made an offer to buy those flats. So I had to send some of them back to maybe to the estate agent, to the solicitor, or to the vendor, or to whoever, to say, go and get this information, go and get this information. But these are information that they should have gathered even before they made an offer on the flat. All right, so I just felt I could use this opportunity to educate a lot of you who are intending to invest in flats or to buy flats on things that you need to note before you even make an offer or try to buy that flat. Whether you are making an offer or you're buying it outrightly or you're using a mortgage, these are important things for you to note before you invest in flats. Number one is to find out the type of flats that you're actually investing or buying. Because you heard flat doesn't mean that all flats are the same. There are different types of flats. There are purpose-built flats, there are converted flats, And there are maisonettes as well that are flats. So purpose-built flats, they are the normal type of flats you see that it's in a whole block of flats. It simply means that that property, right from inception and design, was designed to be built as a flat with different blocks of flats in that building, right? So that's why it's called purpose-built flats. From inception and design, it was meant to be a flat, and that was the way it was built, right? So you see some high-rise buildings that are all flat. You will see some medium-rise buildings that are all flat. You will see that those properties, those designs were all from inception meant to be flats. So you find out whether it's a purpose-built flat. You also find out whether it is a converted flat. There are some flats that were a product of conversion. Either they used to be a warehouse, or they used to be a church, or they used to be offices, or they used to be houses that were converted to flats, right? So you find out which of these categories the flat falls under. Is it purpose-built, or is it converted? Or is it a maisonette? A maisonette flat is a different kind of flat that has the resemblance of a house, but then it also has flat attributes. So it's categorized as flat. And these things are important because they affect say the mortgage you want to get on those flats. These are information that the lender would ask from you if you're wanting to buy a flat and you need a finance, you need a mortgage to buy to invest in those flats. You need to know the type of flats you are buying. And knowing the type of flats you are buying as well helps you also to know the kind of tenants that you're looking to put in those flats. There are certain tenants that are best suited for maisonettes. And in that area, maisonettes are kind of predominantly the preferred kind of flats, because maybe those tenants are looking for flats, but they also want an outdoor space. A lot of maisonettes have gardens, and those gardens are private gardens. So it means that people who live in that maisonette might have access to their own private gardens, which is not the same thing as people who live in, say, purpose-built flats or some converted flats that don't have garden access. So that's why you need to know the kind of flat that you're buying, because it might either affect the sort of tenant you're putting there or affect the finance that you want to arrange to buy that flat. Number two thing that you need to know and to take note of when you're investing in flat is to know what the tenure of that flat is. The tenure, what I mean by tenure is whether it is leasehold or it's freehold. So I've talked about leaseholds before. It simply means that the land on which the structure is standing does not belong to you. It belongs to somebody who is known as a freeholder. And every structure on that land is on leasehold. So you are now paying what you call ground rent to the person or to the entity that owns that land. You pay service charges for the services that are for the maintenance of that property and the structure on there. So you don't own the land, you own a piece of the structure that is standing on that land. Then some flats are also freeholds, right? So you find out whether you are actually freeholder or you are a leaseholder. As a freeholder, your responsibilities are different from that of a leaseholder. Oh, sorry, one second. Oh, where is my... So, as someone who is a leaseholder, your responsibilities are different. As a leaseholder, your responsibilities are different from that of a freeholder. So you need to understand where you stand. Are you a leaseholder or are you a freeholder when you're buying that property? Now, again, in arranging finance for some of my clients buying property, I had a client who wanted to buy a flat in Scotland. All properties in Scotland are freeholds. But then in trying to arrange that mortgage for that client, I found out that some lenders don't actually lend against properties, flats that are freehold. Some lenders don't lend to freehold flats. So you can see how that also affects the choice of lenders or the choice of mortgage products that you want to take to buy that flat. So if the flat is a freehold, there might be lenders who are not happy to lend to flats that are freeholds. If it's a leasehold, there will be more questions. On that leasehold, you have to find out as well, this is number 3 now, what is the outstanding lease term on that leasehold? If the leasehold, say you have 90 years left on the lease, yes, it's still mortgageable at 90 years outstanding leasehold. But then there are some investors whom, as you want to sell that property, some investors who want to buy that property for you might not be comfortable with 90 years leasehold. They might want something longer because they think 90 years will be too short. Meanwhile, for some other investors, 90 years is enough. Some might ask you to actually extend the lease maybe to 125 years lease tend to be the magic word when it comes to outstanding leaseholds in flats. Some people are just looking for something that's 125 or nothing. It must not be less than 125 years outstanding lease. But when it comes to financing a flat, the mortgage lender or the lender themselves, what they are interested in is, at the end of the mortgage term, do you still have up to 40 years left on that lease at the end of the mortgage term? If the answer is yes, then that property is mortgageable. So if you have a flat with an outstanding leasehold of 90 years and you take a mortgage of 25 years on that flat, at the end of 25 years, you will still have 65 years left on the lease. So that's obviously is more than 40 years. So it means the property is mortgageable. Lenders will be happy to lend against that. Some people are just seeking the extra security by, wanting to have at least 125 years lease outstanding on a flat before they invest. So if you are interested in mortgageability, you have to look at how long do you want to arrange the mortgage for, and at the end of that mortgage term, what is left of the outstanding leasehold. That's what determines the mortgageability of that particular flat. Number 4 thing that you need to note when you're investing in a flat is the number of floors in the block and on which of the floors is your flat on. This is another question that the lenders are going to be asking. Oh, you want to buy this flat? Yeah. How many floors are there on that block, and on what floor is yours? You tend to see that sometimes the higher the floor that your own flat is on, the less desirable it is to some lenders to lend against that. And the closer it is to the ground floor, the more desirable it is to some lenders. That is not to say that lenders don't lend to flats, higher up. It is just about the desirability and their assessment of risk. Obviously, there are thousands of mortgage products out there that you can have access to. But some lenders have that level of for every question that a lender is asking, they have a reason for asking. They are not just asking that question because of, for asking sake. Okay, if the flat you're investing in is higher up on the floors, it also means that there is need for accessibility as well. Maybe people who live at the very utmost top of the building, they need a lift. So if there are 6 floors on that building and yours is on the 2nd floor, there is less need for accessibility facilities like lifts to get there. You can easily use the stairs and get there. If you are living on the 6th floor, or if the flat is on the 6th floor, there is more need for accessibility facilities to get there. And these are some of the things that people factor in. And if you're going to be renting the property and you're renting it to somebody who is old, obviously they would not want to rent a flat that is on the 7th floor if you have an 8th floor building, because they have mobility issues. It will take them time to get there unless there is a lift there. And even if there is a lift there, sometimes the lift could even break down and they may not have access to get up there. They will struggle. So it becomes a struggle for them. Now, because the flats are the very topmost floor of that block does not mean it is not a viable investment. It simply means that its features are different from the other ones right below it, and it might be suitable for some class of people more than the others. There are some people who just want to live on a penthouse, right? They want to be at the very top and have a perfect, lovely view of the whole city and of the whole town. So the view becomes their motivation to actually go and rent that flat, or the view becomes their motivation to invest in that particular block or flats, because they know that with the view, people will be enticed to renting that property. So you find out on what floor your flat is on. It's very important. Number 5 thing you have to note and you have to find out when you're investing in flat is whether the flat is an ex-council flat or a council flat. Is it an ex-council property or is it a council flat? This is really important, because if you're going to be using a mortgage to buy that flat, the lender is going to be asking that question. If it's an ex-council property, a lot of lenders categorize it as a higher risk property. If it's a council property, some lenders categorize it as a high risk property as well. So they would like to know what sort of risk they are facing by lending you money to buy that flat. So their risk assessment is also affected by the type of the history of ownership of that flat. So if it was owned by the council and they consider it a high risk property, the terms of the mortgage might be different from lending you if that flat wasn't an ex-council flat, or if it wasn't a council flat. And if it's a council flat, some lenders will go as far as asking, do you know how many of those flats in that block that are privately owned? That's another thing you need to find out. What percentage of flats in that block is privately owned? That's number 6 thing you need to find out. Excuse me. Because some lenders, if a higher percentage of the flats in that block are privately owned, they feel the risk is less, because it means there are more people in that block who own their own property than those who do not own. So the risk exposure to the lender, they feel, is less if there are more people. So some lenders give you a minimum percentage of which the number of flats in that property, if it's less than say 80% privately owned, they are not going to lend. I've had to arrange a mortgage for one of my clients as well who faced this issue. The lender wanted to know what percentage of flats in that block are privately owned. And once they know that, then they can make a lending decision. Number 7 thing that you need to know is the ground rents and the service charges. Be aware of the ground rents and the service charges associated with the flats that you want to buy, because these are going to be factored into your investment cost going forward. You know what it costs you to actually own and run that property. Number 8, which is a very recent thing now, is cladding issues and energy efficiency. When you want to buy a flat, find out whether that flat has a history of cladding and what the cladding situation is like, because it's become a very serious matter since the fire on the flats in London. And it's also important for you to know what the energy efficiency of that flat is, because energy efficiency is a big thing now, even with lenders as well. There are energy efficient mortgage products as well that are targeted at properties that are energy efficient. Also, number 9, you need to know about lifts or accessibility facilities in the block. If there are people who want to buy flats, but they have no idea whether there are lifts in the property or not, or what the accessibility facility situation is like on that flat. Find out whether there are lifts in that flat or whether there are no lifts. If there are several blocks in that flat and there are no lifts, it might not be a very viable investment, because accessibility will be one thing that people who are going to be living there will be considering. Number 10, the last but not the least thing that you need to consider is the freeholder and the cost of buying the freehold or extending the leasehold. When you're buying a flat, you know that there is a freeholder involved. Find out the cost of buying the freehold or extending the leasehold if need be, so that you know and have all this information beforehand. So this is where we're going to stop.